We meet Mahmoud al-Sabah. He was the driver for a more senior local official. His boss's job, forced to liaise with the Syrian Air Force intelligence, one of the most brutal branches of Assad's security operation, to help dispose of the bodies of people taken from prisons and military hospitals. His boss's job was to coordinate local labourers to work at new sites for mass graves, because the local cemetery was at capacity. The section you can see here without headstones is in fact full of bodies. There was no more room. It was time to scale up. The former mayor brings us to the next place, the mass grave with the largest number of bodies. There's some concern that an area around the site is mined. So just to be clear, we stay on the hard road, don't go on the side, yeah? The Russians also had a base here, as did the Iranians. A local fighter checks the edges. From over the wall of the main mass grave site, you can see Russian-supplied communications vehicles inside. The former mayor Mohammed calls another local man who arrives before we go inside. His name is Isam Saad. He operated the digger used to cover over the bodies. Corpses would arrive in refrigerated lorries owned by the state-owned logistics company, he says. The burial of all these people a state function, like sweeping the streets or providing education. The dirt inside covered those taken from prisons like Sednaya and dozens of similar smaller facilities, also from military hospitals. This is literally one of the places where the Syrian uprising was buried. And during that time, Isam was called in day after day to cover layer after layer of bodies for 7 years. Isam explained that initially the bodies were buried at a depth of 1 meter, but animals scavenged the site. After that, the pits had to be made deeper. There are reports that the number of people buried here is much higher than 150,000. But either way, that is a sizable proportion of the entire number of Syrian people disappeared under Assad's regime. And I simply don't know what else to say, really, about this place. Except this. Here is the true size of this mass grave. And here is exactly what these men saw here, in their own words for the first time. Hard to hear, but needs saying. As we left, Moaz Mustafa from the Syrian Emergency Task Force arrived. Himself and his team have made exposing what happened here their life's work. It was the first time he'd set foot on the site.
Where are the forensic teams? Where are the governments and the experts that can help us, number one, secure these places, help us understand how do you exhume bodies from mass graves? How do you take DNA samples for the many families still looking for their loved ones? Even mine, and my uncle could be underneath my feet right now. My friends could be, and so many others.
A few years ago, the regime moved some bodies from here after Moaz's work and others exposed what was happening. Mass graves don't distinguish between people, that's the point. But this is not one big canvas, one single image. It literally belies the sanctity and individuality of every person buried here. And for their loved ones, this is holy ground.